Okay, good evening, everybody. You're all welcome to this section. So, sorry that was starting late. So, most of us didn't join in early. So, had to give some time for others to join. At least, let's start with the significant amount of um, members, right? Attendees before we kick off. So, yeah, you're all welcome to this section. Um, And like I've been saying, that is if you're in our WhatsApp group, the information I've been giving, this is a hands-on workshop, right? So it's not all about um, giving you the information. It's also about showing you how the information can be consumed and how you can use that practically, right? So we're going to be doing some coding. It's mostly coding we're going to be doing, actually, since it's a hands-on workshop. So as you see, the slides are very few and contains little text. Do not bore us with those information. So instead of just giving you those information, you have to be saying everything live. You're going to also apply it, right? And the fun part is also you're going to be we're going to be taking assessments, right? So once we work on something together, you will go back and you'll be asked to improve on that, right? Add your own updates, just furnish it and just do something creative, right, with what you have learned and submit it to the group for everybody to see, right? You basically just push your code to GitHub. You can also kind of put a release if you want people to be able to install it, right? So that you can share whatever you're doing, right? But the important aspect or the important reason for that is that you're going to be able to apply everything you have learned into your own application, right? So to kind of get our feet wet. So at the end of today's section, we are going to be working on something like this, right? Of course, this is a beginner or introductory section, so we're not going to be going overboard. So this is basically a simple profile screen that we're going to be working on today, just to get our hands wet. So we'll just get started with something like this, right? And at the end of the section, you'll be tasked to go back, right? We create something like this and also make improvement, right? Maybe change something, put your name there, put your picture there, or add some things, remove some things, just do something with what you have learned and submit it, right? For me to check and also give you a review on that. Also, others can also check that, right? So, but at the end of today's section, we're going to be having an application like this, right? So yeah, this is just to get our feet wet. Or we're going to be doing something like this, and also the source code for this is also going to be made available to you. This is the GitHub and repo where I've pushed the source code for what you just saw. So if you need guidance when you're working on your own, it's there for you, right? To use. So with that said, I think we can get started, right? Get started. All right. So this is an introductory section to just introduce us to mobile development with Flutter. So if you are a complete newbie to Flutter, this is a good chance for you to learn something, right, about the basics, right, because it's very important. Well, of course, if you already know something, maybe you're at an intermediate level in Flutter, you don't have to worry. You can take these as some kind of a refresher, but we're going to be doing pretty advanced things later, right? So I have this sheet here that's kind of giving us the syllables of what we're going to be covering in our sections, right? We're going to be having sections like this every Saturday. It's not just today, right? It's not like one event something. So be rest assured, if you already know something, it's not a waste, right? You can use this as a refresher. Then in future sections, we're going to be treating something more advanced, right? At your level. It might be something that you already know before, as a revision. If you don't know it before, then it's an addition, right? So yeah, so if you're not a beginner, don't worry. It's not just a beginner kind of section we're going to be having, right? Later, sooner or later, we're going to be having more advanced topics. So for now, just take it as a refresher. All right, so we can get started. Let me present this. All right, so the first question is what is Flutter, right? The section is about Flutter, about mobile development with Flutter, right? So first of all, what is this Flutter that we've been talking about, been hearing about, we've been hearing? Right? Flutter is an open source framework by Google for building beautiful, natively compiled, multi-platform applications from a single code base. Now, this definition is coming from the official Flutter website. Observe, it's flutter.dev, right? It's coming from their own, this is their own description of Flutter. Now, let's break it down. What does that mean? So Flutter is an open source framework by Google. So it was created by Google. Of course, we all know who Google is or who they are, right? Now, for building beautiful, natively compiled, multi-platform applications from a single code base. Now, it is open source in the sense that virtually anybody have access to it, right? So if you go out today and you want to see what is the source code of Flutter, you can have it there. It's open, right? So you can even fork it and try to upgrade it, right? Try to add your own features, whatever you want to do with it. That is because it is open source, right? Now, what do we use Flutter for? We use it to build beautiful, natively compiled, multi-platform applications from a single code base, right? Now, from the first point here, building beautiful applications, right? Building beautiful application. Excuse me. So that is Flutter allows you to create beautiful application that have very good UI. Now, for example, look at the one I just showed us here, right? Even though it's not really doing much, but it's already looking a bit fancy. I won't say it's that fancy, but at least this is looking quite good, right? If you can create something like this and share with your friends and family, they'll be quite impressed because this is something, an application. And you'll be surprised the little amount of code that is going to take you to achieve something like this in Flutter. Unlike when you're writing native code, like let's say you're using Kotlin or Java for Android application or Swift for iOS application, right? It will require you to write more code than you would using Flutter, right? So that is the beautiful UI part of that. Then natively compiled, what does that mean? Now, Flutter is not only the only cross-platform mobile application framework out there. It's another competitor, React Native, right? That one is also very, very good, and it is actually older than Flutter. So it came before Flutter, and before Flutter, it was kind of a big deal, right? So, but now Flutter is actively competing with React Native, right? So I wouldn't choose anyone, just not cause any debate, right? So, of course, here we're more concerned with Flutter. If you want to check out React Native, you sure can. Right. Now, this is natively compiled, right? For Flutter, Flutter is going to emit code, right, that is natively understood by the target platform. If you want to build for Android application, it will emit code for Android. If you want to build for iOS, it will emit code for iOS. So it is the application is having the native code for that platform. Unlike in Flutter, where a bridge is required, right? Even though these days that really isn't an issue, because Flutter is React Native, like I said, is very, very good. So the difference between Flutter and React Native is that React Native will need a bridge, right? Kind of bridge the JavaScript code you're writing to the native implementation that will be understood by the platform. While in Flutter basically just combines down to the native language of that platform. It doesn't need any bridge. It doesn't need to bridge that is that programming language that Flutter uses. It doesn't need to bridge that and whatever language the platform understands. That is because it's going to emit the exact code that platform understands. So that is what the natively compiled game means. And what is the advantage of this? Speed and efficiency. The app is going to be very, very fast, right? So if you see an app that was built with Flutter and an app that was built with Kotlin, which is the native language for developing Android apps, you won't really notice much difference, right? That is because of this natively compiled feature that Flutter is giving us, right? Then we also have multi-platform. What does this mean? To code Android apps, right, you either use Java or Kotlin, right? While in iOS, you use Swift, right? So you cannot expect to write Android code and expect it to run on iOS. It's not possible. So if you want to create an application for Android and iOS, you first of all use Java or Kotlin to create the Android application. And you also use Swift to create the iOS application. But with Flutter, this allows you to kind of just use one language, one framework, and it's going to work on both, right? So this specific application here now is running on an iPhone 13 simulator, right? I can run this application on an Android emulator, on Android device, and it will look exactly the same. It will work exactly the same, right? And I only had to write one code. Like my code base is just one. I didn't have any code base for Android separate or for iOS separate, right? Flutter makes this possible. Right? You just need to write your code once, and it's going to run in whatever platform you support, right? Of course, in the beginning, Flutter was just for mobile application development, but the framework has grown. Now it supports desktop applications. You can write Flutter application and to work on Android, iOS, Mac OS, Linux OS, and also the Windows OS, right? So it's gone massive, right? But of course, in our section here, we're only interested in the mobile aspect, right? We're not going to be talking about how you can use Flutter for Mac OS or Windows OS or Linux OS. We're just interested in Android and iOS, right? So Flutter makes all of this possible for you. So this is just a basic introduction to Flutter. But of course, when we start writing code, you get to appreciate the language. So that is that for what is Flutter. Let's move on. Now, widget. What's a widget? Now, in Flutter, a widget is an immutable description of part of a user interface. Right? Each element on screen is a widget. Now, the final look and feel of a Flutter app depends on the choice. Okay, I think there's a mistake here. On the choice and sequence of widgets used to build the app. Right? So a widget is basically an immutable description of a part of a user interface. But for example, this app that we have here right now was built with Flutter. And in this app, there are several components here. Each of them are widgets, right? Most of them are widgets. I wouldn't say everything at 100% is widget in Flutter, but most UI elements in Flutter are basically widgets. For example, this image I'm seeing here is a widget. This text is a widget, a text widget. These these social media icons, they are widgets, right? We also have this background, right? We have a container that is having this background image is a widget. We also have this fab, right? This floating action button here is also a widget, right? So basically, a Flutter app is composed of widgets, right? You basically use one or more images just to build up your application. And if you look at the point here, very important, that the final look and feel of a Flutter app depends on the choice and sequence of widgets used to build app. So this app is looking this way because this is how I decided to compose my widget. Now, you can decide to compose it differently, and the final look of your app will of course look different from mine, right? You can choose to put the image maybe here at the start of this place, or you can choose to put the text here, or you can even choose to not even add these icons, right? So that's what that point is saying. So Flutter just gives you the widget and allows you to use those widgets in whatever way you want to use it, right? But the important thing is that a widget is basically that immutable description of a part of a user interface. Now, if you know React, right? For those of us that know React, you can think of widget in Flutter like a component in React, right? And the funny thing is that Flutter was actually, should I say, they took innovation, right, from React, right? So they kind of it was inspired by React. So they took that component-based system in React and kind of implement it here using widget here, right? Also, if you do native mobile application development, you also know what widgets are, right? It's basically the same thing here. Yeah. So in Flutter, almost everything is a widget. Like almost everything is a widget. All right. So now we've looked at the definition of a widget, and now what are types of widget? And you notice that I'm not really giving much information, textual information here. That is because that is not what this section is about. I'm just giving us this textual information so that we know what we're going to be discussing, right? Just to give us a brief of what we're going to be discussing. We're going to be seeing how all these things apply live in our coding environment. So what are types of widgets? We have two main types of widgets in Flutter. We have the stateless widget and we have the stateful widget. Now the difference is not really that much, right? So they are both widgets, right? So a stateless widget basically don't have state. It's a widget that doesn't have any state. So what that means is that the widget is kind of immutable, right? So once you create that widget, nothing changes in that widget. This is whatever information that you used to create it for its entire lifetime, right? So for example, this application here, unfortunately, there is no any stateless widget yet in this the one we're going to be building. Now that was intentional. I didn't want us to dive into that yet, but don't worry. When we create a new Flutter project, we will see that the example program that Flutter is going to create for us is going to make use of stateless widget. At that point, I will kind of give more explanation there. But here, right now, this application is comprised of mostly stateless widgets. They are stateless. Why are they stateless? Like for example, this image here is the profile image, right, or the avatar. Now, it's stateless in the sense that it's not going to change, right? It's not going to change. That is how I've designed this application. So that is a stateless widget. I don't intend to change it. So whatever image I put there, that is the image I want it to be, right? For as long as that widget lives, it doesn't change, right? The same thing for this text here, the John Doe, the Flutter developer, and also the icons here, right? Also the floating action button here, though this floating action button is not entirely a stateless widget. Now, in Flutter, you are allowed to compose widgets, right? Like you can say that this widget is a child of another widget. We'll see all that when we start coding, right? So you can actually have a stateless widget that is composed of stateful widgets, right? So for now, it's going to be gibberish. This is new to you, but when we get there, you understand what I'm saying. So the takeaway here is that when we say a widget is stateless, it doesn't mean that it just means that that widget doesn't have any state, right? As it doesn't have any property that is going to change in this lifetime. While if a widget is stateful, it does the opposite of stateless. It means it can be updated, right? It has something that changes, isn't it? Like let's say for example, this profile image now, right? Let's say I'm building an application, and initially I'm supposed to load the profile image from some kind of a server, right? So initially, I don't know what the profile image is. So when you just launch the application, I can just show you some kind of a dummy image, right? You know, the usual avatar for profile, the person gets that dummy kind of image. I'll show it first since I don't know what your actual profile image is yet. Then I'll now allow the application to make a request to whatever or wherever the server is, right? To fetch the image. Now, when the image is back to the application, I can now use that to update this widget to show the updated or the fetched image. Now, in that case, now I cannot use a stateless widget here. Why? Because at some point the widget is going to be changing, right? Something is going to change in that widget, right? So in your application, you often have to make the decision whether you want your widget to be stateful or stateless, and this is very important. Reason being because one of them is more efficient than the other. You could basically just build the entire application using just stateful widget, right? Without even touching stateless widget at all, right? But that is going to cost you a lot of efficiency. Why? Because stateful widgets are more expensive than stateless widget. How? So when Flutter encounters this widget, this avatar widget, right? And we tell Flutter, okay, this is a stateless widget, right? Okay, so Flutter now say, okay, this is a stateless widget, right? Then that means this is not going to change at all. So Flutter can write efficient code that will make sure that this widget is never going to change, right? So it knows that, okay, there's no time in the application that it will need to update this widget, right? So there's no need for updating that widget. That is efficient. But when you say the widget is going to be updating, Flutter needs to prepare for that, right? Because you tell them, okay, this widget might change in the future, something might make it change. So I'm making it a stateless, sorry, a stateful widget. Okay, for that, when I say, okay, that is fine. So I need to prepare for any change that might occur, right, from this, from the properties of this widget, right? So I could make all of these components, widgets, stateless, and it will work fine, right? But for a simple application like this, that is fine. But for a large one, that is very, very inefficient, right? Because you're basically telling Flutter that this one can change in the future, this one can change in the future, and meanwhile, it's never going to change, right? So it's something that we need to consider when you are designing an application. Should this be stateless? Should this be stateful, right? But the good thing is that it's usually easy, and you can easily switch from one to the other, right? Though switching from stateful to stateless is not 100% copy. Why? Because when you're switching from stateful to stateless, you are kind of losing the state, right? Don't worry, that might not really make sense for you now, but when we get there, you see that. But the important thing here is that it's very, very important for you to decide what kind of widget you want to use from the onset, right? Is she a stateless widget you want to use to implement that feature? Is it a stateful widget you want to use? And depending on whichever one you choose, there is a cost of efficiency there. All right, so that is it for our basic introduction to widget types, right? Then here I basically just list some common widgets, right, that you encounter most of the time while I'm working on your Flutter applications. We have this material app widget. And this material app widget is basically a widget that kind of set up your application to follow the material design pattern, right, or the material design specifications, right? So Google published in 2015, Google published this material design specification that it's used majorly in some Android operating system, right? Of course. So you can use it to work on any application, not just Android application. Like for example, this specific application now is running on an iOS simulator, but it's using material design specifications. It doesn't mean it can't work there. So Google kind of published that specifications to something that is platform agnostic, right? You can use it on any platform you want. Yeah. Now, when we use the material app on widget as the parent of our widget 3, we kind of get those setups for free, right? And most of the time, you're going to be doing something like that. Unless you are working on a really advanced application that requires you to do most of those setups yourself, you usually just prefer to just wrap your application with material app. But of course, material UI or material design is not the only specification there. If you are maybe you are developing an iOS only application, right? And iOS users, they're not kind of used to the material design that Android users are used to, right? So you might want to design something that is more, that will make an iOS users feel at home, right? So instead of using the material app, you can use the Cupertino app, right? So Flutter comes with pre-built widgets, right? That kind of makes it easy for you to compose your application with the necessary widgets, right? And those widgets follow the a specific design specification. You understand? So if you're using the material app widget on material design widget, you see that it's designed by default to look the way the material design specifications have specified. But if you're using the Cupertino one, to make your application look more of an iOS application, which is what you will want if, for example, you just want to design an iOS application, right? All right, they also have the scaffold widget. The scaffold widget is kind of just like the material app, right? It's a widget that makes it easy for you to quickly spin up your application, right? So, for example, here, like I said, to create something like this using native code like Swift or Kotlin or Java, it's going to take a lot more code than what it took for Flutter to do this. Now, the reason is not because you don't have to write code in Flutter that much, right? The reason is because there are pre-built widgets that comes with Flutter that makes it very, very easy for you to quickly spin up application. And Scaffold is one of those widgets that makes it very easy. For here, I think the only useful feature of Scaffold I've used here is, I think, is the fab. right? But when we create a new Flutter project, you see that it's very, very easy to use scaffold, the scaffold widget to kind of get some quick UI for your application, right? You get an app bar for free, you get a fab for free, you get a drawer for free, bottom app bar, all those stuff. You see that how the scaffold makes it really easy for you, right? We also have the app bar. Here, there's no any app bar in this application, so I can't show that. We also have the text, right? Of course, for displaying text components or text messages, right? We have container. This is a container, the one with the purple or indigo background. Then we have center widget, right? Now, it's not all widgets that are visible. There are some widgets that are not really visible. They are called layout widgets. So they're just there to kind of lay out other widgets, right? They are there to detect how other widgets are going to be represented on the screen, right? In future section, we're looking at several several examples of such kind of widget, like the row widget, the column widget, and several others, right? Even in this section, we're also going to be looking at some of them, right? Center is one of those kind of widgets. Center widget is just very simple. It's just meant to center whatever you put into it, right? So it will center its child widget, right? So that is basically what it's used for. But you're not going to see any visual representation of this widget on the screen. But it doesn't mean it's not there. It's there, but it's not visible. So it's not all widgets that are visible. We also have the image widget, of course, for displaying images like this one that we have here, right? So yeah, this is pretty much all we have for our slide. Like I said, like I promised, it's going to be very small and minimal, right? And don't worry if everything is still fuzzy in your head right now. It will become all clear when we see a practical example of things that we have discussed. This is just to kind of give you some foundational information, right? So instead of just starting with code on the get-go, you get. So let me exit this, escape from that. All right. So we've covered a few basic concepts um, in Flutter, right? The next thing we're going to do is to see how to use the development environment to spin up a Flutter project, run it on an iOS simulator, and also on an Android emulator, right? And also a physical device. But for that physical device, I'm not going to be showing you because, of course, you can't see my physical device, but I'm going to show you what you need to download, right, and get ready before you can actually deploy the application or test run it, preview it on your physical device, especially if you're using an Android device, right? So we're going to be doing all that, right? So before now, hoping, I believe I've already sent the guidelines, right? The links that we can all use to set up our environment, right? So this session is not going to, it's not about installing those environments. So you're expected to have installed that. If you want to follow along during this section, you can. Of course, the section is recorded. So after the section, you can get the video and recap the section. You can then follow along if you want. If you want to follow along now, no problem. But please, if you have any question that is going to take us back, you can just drop it in the message section, right? So that we don't stay here for long. You know, we have limited time, right? So let's get started. All right, so for Flutter development, the first thing you have to do, of course, you have to install Flutter, right? So what if, for those of us that have done that, the first thing you notice that is that Flutter is going to just kind of come in some kind of a zip file, right? An archive, right? So you unzip it, put it wherever you want to put it, then you set the path to the binary for the Flutter. Then the next thing you do is to run Flutter doctor, right? Excuse me. So I'm going to run doctor on mine. Now the doctor is a very useful feature, right? So it tells you if your computer is all set and ready for Flutter development. So I'll advise you what I usually do if I make sure maybe I update my Flutter binary, right? Let's say I update the latest version to the latest version, right? The next thing I'm going to do is run Flutter doctor, right? Or if something is going wrong, let's say Flutter application is not working the way it's supposed to do. It's supposed to work. The first thing I do is to run Flutter desktop. Try to kind of diagnose everything and tell me what the problem is, right? So when you run it, it's going to kind of show you some kind of detail on those details. And here I have all green checks, right? It's telling me no issues found to tell me that I'm good to go. Now, when you run yours, you might not have all everything checked green, but that is okay. Well, let me just give us the specific ones that it is important that is checked before you can actually develop anything with it. Now, this first one, of course, has to be checked. It determines if you have Flutter at all, right? Right? If you have the the Flutter SDK in your computer, right? If you don't have it, you have to download it, right? Then this second one basically just check for the, let me expand this. Okay, it checks for the if I've accepted the Android licenses, right? Now this one is for Android development. You have to accept the license, right, before you can actually use the SDK. Yeah, right. Then for if you haven't, the Flutter doctor is going to show you an instruction of how to do that, how to accept it, right? We also have the Android toolchain to develop for Android devices, like the Android SDK. I have that version 32. This is not the latest one. Yeah, I have an Android SDK. It's important that it's checked also. Right, then the next one here, Xcode. This, if you don't intend to develop for iOS, you don't need this. In fact, I think if you run this on a Windows computer, it's not really going to show you because it knows that your computer doesn't support an Xcode. Xcode only works for Mac, right? So that one is not important. Then Chrome also is not compulsory that you must have it. Is if you want to develop for the web, right? Like I said, Flutter is kind of is a big deal now, right? So it has grown massively, right? So it's not just mobile application that you can develop with it. You can develop desktop applications and also web applications with Flutter. Then this next one, Android Studio, very important. You need that. So you can actually develop Flutter apps with your Visual Studio Code, but you still have to install Android Studio. Why? Because that is how you are going to get the Android SDK, right? So why not? Since you have the Android Studio installed, just use it. But if you still prefer to use Visual Studio Code, you can. So you just need to install the Dart and Flutter plugin, and extensions, Visual Studio Code, and you'll be good to go with that. Maybe the Android Studio is too heavy for your computer, so you might choose to use Visual Studio Code first. Then the IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition, yeah, this one is also not compulsory. You don't have to have it. Android Studio is enough. VS Code also is not important. Android Studio is enough. But if you want to use that, then connected device. This is just telling me that how many devices I have available, right? That I can deploy my application or preview it on, right? Then HTTP host availability. That is my network, right? How good is the network? So yeah, this is pretty much that. So like I said, the important ones is the first one, Flutter SDK has to be there. Then Android Studio has to be there, right? You also have to accept the licenses, right? And also you need the Android SDK, which will come with Android Studio. So install Android Studio, you will ask to install the Android SDK, right? So that is pretty much that. Once you have all that checked, then you are good to go. So it mustn't be all that is checked, right? So that is that. All right, so my Flutter doctor doesn't find any issue, so we're good to go. So basically just open Android Studio. This is mine. So we're going to be creating a new project, Flutter project, of course. So okay, this asks for my Flutter SDK path. The ID can find it because this is my first time running the application, so it knows where to find it. Of course, if yours can't find it, you just need to direct the IDE to where you installed Flutter. Right? You basically just point to the Flutter folder and to pick the SDK from there. Then here, let's choose the name for the project. I'll call it, what should we call it? Flutter tutorial. But I've used Hello Flutter, but I think I already have a project like that. Yeah. Right? Then you can add a description for the project, then the project type, an application or a plugin or a package or a module or a skeleton. But yeah, for ours, we're working on an application. Then the organization, this is basically your domain in reverse order, right? Your maybe your personal domain, your website domain, or your company's domain. For now, it doesn't matter, but when you start, this is actually specific to Android, right? When you start developing application that is meant to be deployed live, and users are expected to install it, that is when this becomes important. Even when developing your own applications, you need to be careful with this, because it has to be unique for Android, right? Android uses this to know the package of the application you're installing. So I expect everyone to be unique, each application to be unique. So me, what I basically do, if I'm getting a new project and it's just for testing, right? I can basically just use the name of the project in the domain, or the in the reverse domain, right? I can just say something like .flutter tutorial .epsc, right? That makes sense. Something like that. Of course, you can type your own if you want it. It just needs to be something unique, right? There's no any requirement that you must use any specific domain there. Then the platforms, you can choose, for the languages, you can choose which language you want to use for the native code that Flutter is going to be emitting. For Android, I will go with Kotlin, because that is the latest language, right? The current language that Android development uses natively. Then for iOS, I will also use Swift, right? Then platforms, like I said, Flutter supports not just mobile applications, but mobile platforms, but also desktop and web. So if you want to develop for those also, you can mark them, right? But for us, we don't care about those. We only care about Android and iOS. So I'll just do that. So once I'm done with that, we'll create a new project. All right. So if it's your first time creating a project after installing Flutter and basically just setting up your IDE, it might take a longer time to kind of prep your environment for you, right? So what you basically do is you wait for it to finish before let it just download whatever it needs to download, right? That is what basically just getting the dependencies and just setting up your ID for you to be able to use it. Right? Basically just wait for it to finish before you start typing anything, so that it doesn't get slow or kind of bring out any error. For mine, is very fast now because this is not the first time I'm running the Android Studio, and this is not the first time I'm creating a Flutter application with it. So it pretty much have most of what it needs, right? So I'll kind of reduce this. All right. So we have a Flutter application here. A Flutter application here. Now to quickly just brush through the structure of the application, we have quite a number of folders here and a number of files, right? For now, we're not going to be concerned about most of them, but the one that we're interested in now is the lib folder, right? The lib folder, this is where you put your Dart code for your Flutter application, right? So the main Dart here is the main file that is going to be run when your application start up, right? So inside here, you can put basically all the files, all the source files that your application is going to be needing. But for now, we're going to be using one file, just kind of use a single file kind of thing, right? To not complicate things for ourselves. But in future section, you see us creating different folders, different files, and all. All right. So yeah, this is what Flutter creates for us. So we have this main the Dart file. The Dart language is what Flutter uses by default. That is the language that Flutter uses. Right? And it's a language that was also created by Google. You can also check that out. I also sent a link to kind of teach you the basics of Dart programming, right? So you can go over the, you can go through the content of that link to have some understanding of Dart programming. All right, so in this source file, we see quite a number of things here, right? And the good thing is that it's actually well commented. So the Flutter team kind of they did justice to the file, the startup file, just to kind of explain what the hell is going on in the application, what you are seeing. Right? But first things first, before we start explaining, because it might get tricky, right? There are some things that we don't really need for now. So I'm just going to run the application, right? So that I will see how it looks like first, right? So of course, to run the application, you can either run it on your iPhone or your iOS simulator, like one I have running already, this one, or you can run it on an Android emulator, right? You can basically just spin up one emulator and run it on that, right? So like I said, this section is now about showing you how to set these things up. I sent a link for that, right? So you have to basically download the images for an emulator, set that up before you can actually have an emulator there, right? Why for iOS, you need to download an Xcode, right? You basically install Xcode in your Mac before you have the simulator there. So for this one, I'm just going to spin up one of my emulators here. I'll close that. Okay. Also close this to give me more space. All right, so the emulator is going to start up. It might take a while, right? But while that is starting up, so let me launch our application to the iPhone simulator. Okay, so while that is running, let me quickly check the message section for any question. Okay, please can the materials be sent here again? Okay, I don't really have access to that. It's on my WhatsApp. So maybe you can basically just message me on WhatsApp after the section, right? So that I can send the material to you. I'm not connected to my WhatsApp, so I can provide that now. All right, so the the iOS build is still running, and the Android emulator is starting up also. Okay, so that we don't waste time. While those are coming up, let's okay. All right. Let's look at the file that Flutter created for us. So we have this main.dat file, and the first statement there is an import statement. Now, this import statement is basically used for importing packages, right? Or files in packages from packages. Okay. So here we're basically importing material.dat material file from the Flutter package, right? And the reason being, we want to use the material design specifications for these applications, right? Then in the next line, we have this function definition, right? We have this function definition here. We have void main, and inside the function definition, we have the run app method, right? So just like in most languages, when you have a main function, that is going to be the starting point of the application, right? So when our app is run, this is the first point. This is where to start from. And what does it do? It calls a method called run app, right? Run app, right? And this run app is accepting a parameter, and here we're passing my app to it. Now, what is my app? If you come down here, we see that my app is a class, and it extends stateless widget. Now, this means that my app is basically a widget. That is how you create a widget in Flutter. You extend one of the types. You either extend the stateless widget or you extend a stateful widget. Here we're extending a stateless widget to say that, okay, this widget is basically stateless. It doesn't have any state, right? So that is the kind of widget we are creating, right? Then here we have a constructor, right? So please, this is not a Dart section, so I'm not going to be explaining that in depth. I'm just going over this just to give us a basic overview, right, of what we are looking at. Right. So if you need some Dart knowledge, please just look for resources. And good thing that you don't even need to know that at an expert level to work with Flutter. You just need to know the basics, right? What are classes? What are inheritance? What is OOP? All the stuff, right? And you'll be good to go. So you don't need to master that. Continue with this. All right. Okay. I think this is an overkill for us, right? The emulator starting up is kind of slowing down. Sorry? Okay. All right. So I think we have to choose between one. Like we have to use one of these emulator or simulator so that we don't end up um, giving the system too much work to do, right? So we need to be as fast as we can so that we don't consume much time here. So basically, since the simulator is already up, right? I'll basically just stop on the emulator, right? But after the section, just to show that okay, everything looks similar on both iOS and Android. After we're done, we might basically just come back, close the iOS simulator, then spin up the Android emulator, just kind of preview the application here, right? But they work similarly, right? So I don't want to kind of consume too much RAM and make the computer slow since I'm actually presenting with it again. That is basically too much work for you to be doing. Okay. All right. So this should give the build more time to build the application there. All right. Okay. So now we have our stateless widget called my app, right? Called my app, and it extends the stateless widget class. All this is coming from material.dat, isn't it? Coming from material.dat. All right. I think our iOS build is ready, so we can review that. Right. So we have this. We have this on our screen. So this code, snippet of code you are seeing here is what is producing this specific output here. So we have an application having an app bar with the title, Flutter, demo homepage, and some kind of a text here, giving us an instruction to push the button. Then, sorry, kind of telling us how many times we have pushed the button, right? Then we also have some kind of another test, kind of showing us the number of times we have pushed the button. Then we also have this fab here, floating action button down here. So we can basically click, right? And as you can see, as we click it, the number is increasing, right? The number is increasing. So as we click, the number is increasing. So that is basically what this application is doing. It's simple, but it kind of explains the basic concept of Flutter, right? It gives you an example of a stateless widget and also a stateful widget. So for now, we'll just have a basic introduction to stateful widget, but we're not going to go into it deep for now. In the feature section, we'll look at stateful widget better. So here we have this stateless widget, my app, right? And in that stateless widget, what do we have? We have a method, build. Now, a stateless widget is an abstract class, right? It's an abstract class. Abstract classes means you can't really create an instance of that class until you implement some of its required method. So they kind of they're like classes that have missing implementation. So you can't use them until you implement it, right? So my app extending stateless means it needs to implement some kind of a method that needs to be implemented. And here, the only method that this stateless widget is asking us to implement is a method called build method. Now, this build method is or function, if you like, or if you prefer, is basically a function or a method that returns a widget, right? So in the method, you can construct whatever widget you want to construct. But once you're done constructing it, basically just return it to the build method, right? So that is what a Flutter is requiring from us when we're constructing a stateless widget, isn't it? So we can see that the constructor or the function pass a parameter called the build context. For now, we're not really going to worry ourselves about that. This has to do with the way Flutter works, right? Flutter builds some kind of a layout called a widget tree or a hierarchy called widget tree, right? For now, it doesn't really matter much to us, but once we get to something like that, we understand what the widget tree is and how the build context relates to the widget tree. right? So here, inside the build method, we're creating a widget. Remember, like this function or method has to return a widget, right? So here we're returning a material app. This means material app is also a widget, right? If I should kind of highlight this, okay, the ID is not showing me any information, but let me see. I can do something like this. All right. So you can see material app is a class that extends stateful widget, right? So we can return material app here. Why? Because it is a widget, so it's a valid widget. Again, this is not a class about that, so you have to look for resources to learn the Dart programming languages to understand OOP, right? Classes and inheritance and all this kind of stuff. Okay. So here, us being able to return material app is due to the fact that material app is also a widget, so we can return it, right? So here, the material app, like I said before, is a widget that is built into Flutter to kind of just give us that setup for using the material designer specifications, right? So here it has a number of parameters we can pass it. The first one is title, like the title of our app. Here we're passing the Flutter demo as the title of our app, and then the theme, right? You can use themes to kind of define the common look and feel of the application, right? So if you maybe you're creating an application that have some kind of a light theme and also a dark theme, right? This is what you use to do that. You use the theme data object to create the theme for your application, right? Then the theme has a primary swatch. The primary swatch kind of defines the primary color, right? Like which color is the most dominant color in the application, right? Here, the color for the primary swatch is colors.blue. That is the blue color. If you check here, the dominant color is here is what? It's blue. So if we should change that to some other color, let's say, for example, I change it to green, for example, you see that automatically the app is going to pick up that color. As you can see, the dominant color here now is like green, right? That's because my team is using the green as the primary swatch, right? So that's that. So don't worry, we'll get to things like this. Then the home parameter is what you use to define the actual content of your app. What should the material app display, right? What is it going to display? Here we're yet again passing another widget here. And you know this widget is called what? My homepage, right? It's called my homepage, right? And the title here is parameter, right? It's a parameter to the class, right? That we can pass to it here. And here the name we're passing that is being passed is Flutter demo homepage. That is what you actually see at the top of the application here. Flutter demo homepage, right? So let's move on. Then we saw this my homepage being used, but what is actually my homepage? Where is the definition of my homepage? It is down here. So here we see that my homepage is also another type of widget, right? And in this case, it's not, instead of a stateless widget like my app here, is what? A stateful widget. Now, what's the difference? First of all, let's look at how it is created, right? Unlike for a stateless widget, where you basically just extend the stateless widget, write your constructor, then you implement the build method, right? For a stateful widget, something is different. Let's see that. Here, you create your constructor, of course, and pass any parameter that you need for the class. Then you kind of define your parameters or your class properties, something like that. Here, we have a string title as a property of the class. Then here, instead of overriding or implementing a build method or function, we're going to be implementing a create state method, right? So here, unlike for stateless widgets where you have to override a build method, here you have to override or implement a create state method. And here, unlike the build method where you return a widget, what you return here is not a widget. What you return is a state, right? You return a state. Okay. So here, the state that we're going to return is parameterized in the sense that it is generic, right? So it's a state for something, right? State for a specific kind of a widget, right? Here, we say this is a state, it's going to return a state for my homepage. So that is what this basically means. that here we're going to be creating a state for my homepage, and we're going to return that state here, right? Then here, the code here is using a shortcut method for creating a function, right? Like here, it's using kind of an arrow function here. So instead of writing the entire body of the function, since the function is just containing one line of code, right? So there's no need to write the body. You can basically just put the arrow symbol here. You basically just put the one line statement for that function. Yeah. Now this is similar to something like this. I could just do it like this, and it will still be the same thing. So do not confuse them. This is basically what happened done there. It's the same thing. The reason it was done that way is because it's just one line of code. So it's kind of a syntactic sugar that gives us. So instead of us writing all this stuff just for this one line, basically just do something like this, and we're good to go. So that is different there. So please don't get that confused. Don't be confused there, right? Then here in the create state, we see that there is a call to something again, right? So we're creating another thing. What is that thing? Now in this case now is the actual state, right? So we're returning we're asked to create a state and return it. So here we're calling another class to handle the creation of the state for us, right? And here with the name of the state is named my underscore my homepage state. Here, right? So then here we have this state definition here. We have class underscore my homepage state extend state of what? My homepage. Like state for my homepage, right? Then in the class, it has its own property, integer counter, then its own method, right? Right? So it has a method in underscore increment counter. And what this method does is that whenever it is called, it basically just increases the value of this underscore counter and call set state, right? Like I say, we're not going to be going over stateful widget for now, but for now, just have a basic idea of this that when you call set state is a special method in every state. And when you call it, you only call it when you intend to change the state of your widget. Like something has changed, right? And you want Flutter to reflect that change, right? You basically just call set state, right? And it gives you, you can pass a function of what you want it to run, right? Of course, that is optional. You can even put your state modifying code outside that function. It's still going to work, right? The important thing is just calling the set state method, and that is it. And Flutter will react to update the state of the widget. And one other thing again, the state here is also an abstract class, so it will force you to implement a build method. Also, you have to implement a build method. And now this build method is now similar to what we had in a stateless widget, right? Where you have to build a widget and return it. So you are also going to do the same thing for a stateless widget. The only difference is that you do it in the state of the widget, not in the widget itself. So notice the difference. For a stateless widget, you create the widget or the component of that widget in the state itself. While for a stateless widget, you basically create the state or the widget in the UI, right, in the state. Okay. So yeah, that is basically that, right? Then in the build method for the stateless widgets, we see the code returning a scaffold for us. I explained that the scaffold is basically a widget that kind of make it easier for us to quickly spin up UI, right? Without having to write much of the code ourselves, right? So here we see the scaffold having an app bar property or parameter. And in that app bar property, we're creating an app bar widget that basically shows some kind of a text, right? So you see the application here, the app bar, this is the app bar, right? This is the app bar, and it's showing a text. And the text is going to show here is whatever we pass as the widget, as the title parameter here, right? So as you can see here, when creating the homepage, we pass a title, right? So whatever we pass this, what's going to be shown there, the app bar. Then in the body is whatever you want the page to show, or the scaffold to show, the main content of the application, right? So the body is basically this white space you are seeing here. That is the body, right? This entirety of this white space. That is the body. So inside the body, we use a center widget. Like I said, center widget is just meant for centering stuff. It doesn't display anything. So it is going to center whatever it is you are putting to it. That is why we see this text here, center, right? Then we also have inside the center widget, we have a column widget. And the column widget is meant to lay out elements in a column, right, in a column. So we'll look at that in the future section. Don't worry about that for now. But we're also going to be using some of this widget without really going in depth. The reason is because I want to also have an application that we can work with for now, because there are hundreds and hundreds of widgets built into Flutter. There's no way we can possibly cover everything. And if you want to spend time explaining each widget, you're basically going to waste your time, right? So normally, what you do, you don't have to learn everything, right? So if you just need to implement something, the first thing you do is to Google, right? So widget for Flutter. If you find it, good, use it. But if you don't find it, then you can look for external libraries, right? If you can't find it, also you can now come down to create your own from scratch. You understand? So, but most of the time, what you need is already done by somebody else or by the Flutter team themselves, right? That is, it is built into Flutter. That's how useful or how awesome Flutter is. So most of what you need is already there. You just need to use it, right? You need to write your own code from scratch. So here we basically have a column that is going to display those texts in the column, right? The first text is how many times you have pushed. The text to show you how many times you have pushed. Then the text here, the second text is the actual number of times you have pushed, right? Yeah, awesome. They also have the floating action button to kind of make the scaffold show us a floating action button for free. Normally, you have to create this stuff yourself, but with the scaffold, you basically just kind of pass a floating action button to a property or a parameter, and you have it right there for free, like so quick and easy. Yeah, right. So yeah, this is just a basic overview of the snippet of code that Flutter has created for us. But like I said, I'm not going to understand everything, the entirety in one go, but over the course of this program, right? That is in our future sections, right? We'll get to understand most of what is happening here, right? By the end of the day, you have the full knowledge to be able to create your own Flutter application using this widget and also any other widget that is available out there for you to use, right? So we'll go with that. All right. So our time is going, right? So we can get to start creating our own application, right? Let's see how we can create our own application using some of the information that we have just learned and some that we have not actually learned, but we'll just see how it is used, right? Then from there, you learn it. Like I said, there are hundreds of widgets. There's no way for us to cover everything. Yeah. But when you see how it is used, you get an idea of that. Then also, you also learn how to look for widgets by yourself. Because most of the time, you're going to be, what you need is already there, right? So you need to learn how to be able to look for those widgets and use it, right? So let's get started. So the application we're going to be making, we've seen something like that, right? This application, right? Something like this, some kind of a profile view or profile screen application, right? I chose this because it looks interesting, right? So if you are creating your first application, at least it should reflect something about you, right? Maybe you can kind of put your nice picture of yourself there, and you put your name there, then the title, a Flutter developer, right? Then kind of put your social media links. Of course, here for this one, I intentionally left it blank, right? They don't really go anywhere. But ideally, you can basically just put maybe your link, then you make the application open these respective social media platform to open your profile, right? And also this fab button, the for calling, right? Let's say somebody viewing your application wants to call you. Of course, this is your profile screen, so the person should be able to contact you, right? And contact you using your social media handles and also through call. Maybe when you click on this button, you basically just open your dialer, right? To make a call to you, just start the call, or maybe just paste your number in the dialer and allow the user to be able to call you. That is pretty cool. But of course, this one is not going to do that because I don't want us to complicate things, right? But in the future section, who knows? When you have all the experience, you might be able to achieve that. All right, so let's get started, right? Let's get started. So the first thing I'll do is to clear out all this. Once we don't need this, we're going to do something similar, but to help us understand, right? We are going to be creating our ours from scratch, right? So that we don't get confused, because the more you do this by yourself, the more used to it you get, right? You get used to it. But if you don't basically always use the bootstrapped file that Flutter gives you when you create a project, They're not going to learn like that. So one thing you should do when you go to create a new project, clear out everything, right, and start from afresh, right? Do it by yourself. If you can't do it, look for resources, right, and take corrections again. From there, you have this and the experience, and that is even important because most of the time when you're working on a real application, you're not going to be using that, right? So this is not any application that somebody is going to be using. The counter example, for example, it's not any real application anybody, right? So most of the time, you're going to clear out that those snippet of code. So you just get used to it. So here, I've named my app, sort of my app. So I just call it, I'll create a class for that, right? Now, when creating your widget, right, in Flutter, you can create everything manually, like just type class app extend stateless widget and something like this. Then you will trying to get the ID to give me some assistance there. So here you see, when I create the app widget, right, I had to override the build method, but instead of typing it out myself, right, I basically just started typing build, and the ID gave me an option to paste the snippet, right? That is, just create the code for me. Now, this is a handy feature in ID, right? But you can even simplify things further. Instead of you doing something like this, you can also allow the IDE to generate the snippet of code for both stateless and stateful for you automatically, right? Which is pretty cool. So if you just start typing something like STL, right, the full stateless, you see this description, new stateless widget, and when I hit enter on that, it creates a snippet of code for me. Now it's waiting for me to kind of just type in the name of the class here. So I just put app as the name of the class, right? The same thing for stateless. You can quickly bootstrap a stateless widget without having to write it by yourself. Just start writing STL. Here is stateless. Sorry, for stateful, STF for stateful widget. Then here I call it my app, something like this. You see what it did? It gave me the widget, and also it also created the state for me, which is pretty awesome, right? But of course, I won't recommend this starting out. You should be doing it manually so that you get used to it. So let me move that. All right. So we have our app, right? Now, if we run this, we're basically just going to see something blank. So I'll restart the application. Okay, it's trying to perform hot reload. You can hot reload this. You can hot reload that. So okay, sorry. Let me stop the application. Okay, so it's still running. My bad. All right, well, before that comes up, so no waste our time. Let's just keep going. So what we're trying to create, right, is something like this, right? Something like this. Let me get something like this. So the first thing you do when designing your UI in Flutter, we know that everything is based on a widget, right? Everything on your screen is basically a widget, just like in React, where everything is a component. Here in Flutter, everything is a widget, right? So you start to kind of mark out which one is, excuse me, let me go back there. Which one is a widget in our application, right? So the first component of our UI you see here, we see this blue or purple background here, indigo, here, right? This is a widget. Then we also have this image, a widget. We also have this text, another widget, and this one, another widget. We also have this social media icons here, they are widgets. And also this fab widget, right? So we'll start creating them one by one. So the first one I'm going to create is this container right here. So currently, right now, our application is looking bare, right? Blank. So when you open it, as you saw, it was completely black, right? Excuse me. I kind of find it difficult sometimes to navigate with this simulator. Okay. All right, cool. So this is how our application currently look like, right? So because, well, it contains nothing. So it's basically doing a container which is nothing. It's not visible currently, so there's nothing for it to show, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is to make our app return the material app widget so that we can take advantage of the material specification, right? Material design specification, right? So there we have that. Then for the home, we make it return another widget. So here I'm going to call it a profile widget. So we'll create that. It's not existing yet, so we'll have an error there. But before that, we can define a theme for our app. So don't mind the speed I'm using. I just want us to be able to cover this before our time runs out, right? Because you can always watch this later and you can ask questions in the group here also after I'm done and get more information there. Of course, the source code is also going to be provided to you for you to be able to reference later. So here we're going to create a team, a very simple team in data. Let's give it a primary swatch of Indigo. So the next thing we have to do now is to create this profile widget, right? What is this profile widget? So here I'll just come down, stateless profile widget, right? Now, what do we want this profile widget to show? What do we want it to show, right? We can make this profile widget a constant constructor. Important constructor. Don't worry about that. If you don't know how that works, you need some kind of knowledge of Flutter to understand what the const keyword is doing there, right? But it's not. If you don't use it, it doesn't mean your app is not going to work. But you know your ID is going to give you some warnings and hints there. But it's not important for now. All right. So in our profile, if you run our application now, you see that, yeah, it's pretty much that. While this debug thing in here kind of Flutter telling like, okay, this application is in debug mode. Yeah, it's not in production, but that's all, nothing. Okay, and that's because I've not really done anything yet, so that's not surprising at all. So now let's put in something, right? So in our profile widget, we kind of basically just return a scaffold, right? Remember, the scaffold makes it easy for us to quickly build our UI, right? Build our UI without having to write most of this code ourselves, right? Here we can add an app bar, we can add a fab and some other pretty cool stuff. But for now, we don't really need the app bar. What we just need is need the body to kind of give us content, right? Body is the content of the screen. So if you save this now and reload that, right? Now, when your app is running, one cool thing that Flutter does for you that you can quickly reload your app as I'm making changes, right? Without having to run the application, and it's going to deflate very fast. But you can hot restart it, right? Like restart the application very fast without Flutter having to waste time doing that for you. It's a very, very cool feature. We'll look at that more in depth in our next session. If you look at our syllabus, I'll send that to everyone. So if we open our app now, okay, so now it's no longer black at least, it's white now, right? That's because we're giving it a scaffold. So a scaffold now is kind of giving our app some kind of a good UI, right? Though it's not that good yet, but at least it's something better than black. So now we have our UI showing us on this white background stuff, right? So now let's make it do more. So the first one we're going to do is the container, the Indigo container, right? That is showing the background, some kind of a background or a plane for the profile avatar to lay on, right? So the first one I'm going to do is we're going to use this. We need it to be stacked on top of each other. Oh, but I have to minimize it again. This is really painful. Okay, so we need this our container to be at the back, right? This our avatar is going to be at the top of it, right? So we're kind of trying to implement some kind of a stack, right? So we have a stack-like structure here, right? So we have the container, and at the top of the container we have something on top of it, which is this avatar. So how do we do that? Very easy. We can use the stack widget in Flutter, right? So if I do something like this, stack is one of those layout widgets that doesn't really have a UI, right? It doesn't display anything, but it's doing something, right? It's laying out these children. So now this stack has this property called children, where you can define what is a master. Now the stack is going to use the order that you define the children to lay out the children. The first child that comes is going to be rendered first. Then the second one is going to be rendered on top of the first. The third is going to be rendered on top of the second and the third and the first, right? So let's see how that works. First of all, let's just render our container. We just have the background that we want. And give it the height of 400, for example. And give it any height you want. Then for the color, you want it to be indigo, right? Of course, you can be creative here and you also use any other color that you like, right? Maybe you don't like indigo or you don't like purple, and use blue or green, whatever you want. But now, if you saved it, you will see that our app is starting to look a bit better. Let me minimize back to that. This is not our app we're working on now. Okay, this is our app. Cool, right? So it's no longer from a blank application. We are starting to get something more meaningful, right? And how much lines of code have we written so far? Not that much, right? That is how cool Flutter is. We're doing so very small amount of work to get something like this on screen. I promise you that if you should do something like this on natively, to do something like this natively, you have to write a significant amount of code. Even though, yeah, this is still basic, but of course, Flutter is just so cool, right? So we have something like that. Now, the next thing we want is an avatar, right, to display the image. Now, first of all, we need an image, and we need to load that image, right? So for this, we're going to, in the future section, we're going to look at how to, work with avatars, images, and assets more. But for now, we're just going to take a very quick dive at that, right? So I'll copy the person.jpg image I have here on my end. Then for you, you can, basically use any image you want. I recommend you use your image, right? Since you're making your profile screen, so yeah, it makes more sense to just basically use your image. I think it's in this Android folder. So here, the convention is basically to create a folder in the root of your project. You call it assets, right? And inside that folder, you basically just put your profile asset. Yeah, I'm just going to paste the image there. Here you can paste your own image and name it whatever you want, but just make sure you're referencing your name, the name you use, if it is different from what I'm using now here, right? So let's load that. How do we load that? We come to a file here called popspec.yaml. I open that. Now, there are a lot of things here that we don't really care about for now, but what we really want to look at is the part where we define assets, right? Asset, which is this part. Here we see to add assets to your application, add an asset section like this. So we have an example below. Now, what some people do is basically just uncomment this side and basically start using that. But I don't recommend that. Reason because if you are not really good with, if you are new to this kind of config file, right? YAML that uses an indentation, right? You can easily do something wrong here. So what I recommend is basically just you come here. What I usually do, I'll come to this empty space here. Like this for beginner, just a beginner friendly way of doing a thing, right? And I'll hit enter. You see, it's using the correct indentation for this line. I'll hit enter again, see using the correct indentation. I'll now look at what was I required to do. I need an asset section, right? So I basically just type asset, and the ID is already helping me to do that. And the next thing to do is to define the assets, right? You list them. So I'll hit enter, and as you can see, it's indented correctly for me. I don't have to do this manually, which is pretty awesome. Now I'll now list the asset I want to load. Asset / person JPG. That is the name of the asset that I want to do it. So I'm just going to go with that. If you want to add more, you can add more, but you don't even need any more. So I'm just going to remove that. And once I'm done with that, you can basically just run pop get, right, to update your dependencies, just like that, right? Yeah, cool. We've added our asset, right? Added our asset. So now we can use that. So let's try to load the avatar. So we have our stack here. So say for avatar. So Flutter have this widget, very useful widget for building an image as an avatar, right? So when you define the background image here, I'm just going to say load asset image. Like I said, you don't have to worry if you don't understand most of what is going on. This is intentional, right? Just to give us something that we can build up, right? Okay, just have something that you can tweak to just make it work. Have something, build it, run it, review it, just get excited and have something running. Like before you start looking at the read. So don't worry if you don't understand it right now, you're going to understand it later, right? So the asset name, I'll just say asset / person dot ticket. Cool. So yeah. Now let's try to run our application. I'll save it. We have our avatar right here. Yeah, not cool. So why is our avatar there? First of all, is this is a stack, right? So a stack structure basically just stacks its children. So it first of all render the container. Now it's rendering the avatar on top of the container. But that's not where we want it to be, right? First of all, we want it to be centered, right? We want it to be centered, right? So okay, we can basically just wrap this in a center widget. Now, when you want to wrap an element or a widget with another widget, you can do that manually, right? Something like that. Just maybe copy it like this. Then you create the new widget that you want to put. Something like this. Sorry. Right. Then paste it. Right. But of course, Flutter again gives us more flexibility here. You have okay, someone is raising his hand. Okay, do you have a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, okay. Yeah, I can.
So instead of wrapping it in a center widget, like is there a property you can put within the widgets, like align it to the center?
Yeah, but it's not all widgets that support that, right? So you can have layout widgets like column or row that have property that allows you to align its content on center at the center. But it's not all widgets that support that. Most of the time, when you want to enforce something like this, you basically just wrap your widget with other widget that what you want. Yeah. So, for example, this cycle avatar doesn't have such property, so you don't have any choice. You have to wrap it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, this is one way you could do that. But yeah, let me turn off. Sorry, thank you. But Flutter again gives us another um, pretty cool feature that we can use to wrap our widget, right? So instead of doing this manually, I'll go to the back to where we were before. So you can basically just right click on, bring your cursor to your element that you want to, or the widget that you want to wrap. Just right click on it. Then you see show context actions, right? And you see some pretty useful shortcuts, or you can just use the wrap with widget if the widget that you want to wrap with is not among these, right? So just click wrap with widget. But here, I want to wrap with center, it's already there. So I can just click center, Just as you can see, the ID just does it for me without me having to do it myself. This is pretty cool, and you something you need and you also love while working with Flutter, right? So we have wrapped it with center. If we should run this now, we'll see that okay, our image is centered, but not really where we want it. So it is centered horizontally, which is what we want, but vertically, nah, we don't want it to be centered vertically, right? Now, our profile screen is going to be having information displayed in column, right? In the column, we have the avatar somewhere here, and then we have a couple of text and social media, and also the fab button down, right? So that is an opportunity to use the column widget. So instead of wrapping the cycle avatar alone as in a center widget, we can basically just wrap this cycle avatar in a column widget, right? So I'll just wrap this with column, right? So now it's in a column of widget, right? Now this column widget allows us to lay out our element or our widget in column, right? That is stacked vertically in column, right? Now when we save this, now we say, okay, yeah, our avatar is working. Sorry, our code is working the way it's supposed to work, but we still haven't got it right yet. First of all, look at where our avatar is right now. It's kind of covered by this um, notification bar stuff that the simulator have or the iPhone have, right? Now we don't want that, right? So most of the time we want to know where we can start rendering our element, our UI element on, right? You know, this is a notched portion of the screen, right? And we don't know that, but Flutter knows, right? We can allow Flutter to make the decision for us so that it will not start rendering our elements under this notched part or the notification part of the UI, right? So how do we do that? We can wrap our entire stack, right, inside another widget called safe area, right? So here, I just choose wrap with widget. Then here, I just tap on safe area. Now, I hope we are starting to see some pattern here. Now, in Flutter, is usually about wrapping widgets, kind of you're composing widgets to build your UI, kind of something like you do in React, right? Now, when you look at this now, we have this. Now, this is not something I did in the example solution that I sent to you guys, but I just want to use it here so that we see that such a feature exists if you want to see something like that, right? Okay, so this is cool, but right now our avatar is kind of small, right? It's too small, isn't it? It's looking too small. We want that to be bigger. Now we can change the radius of our cycle avatar to something bigger. Let's say 30, for example. Yeah, still not that big. Let me use something like 100. Okay, 70, for example. Yeah, not bad. I think this is good. All right. I think it's a little bigger than what I used in mind, but this is still fair. We can reduce that to 60. So not going too much space there. Okay, fine. All right. All right, cool. All right. So now let's shift the avatar. We want the avatar to display down here, right? We want to shift it down, right? So what can we do? We can kind of pad the display. We can add a padding, like an empty space, right? That's going to shift our avatar down. So here we'll add another child to this our column we get. Call it the padding, right? And padding is going to be an edge instead. So don't worry, this is kind of just a rushed work I'm doing here. So in our next section, we'll look at most of this stuff with deeper perspective. Here, at the top padding, or something like let's say 100. Let's do that. Almost there. So 120. Almost 130 should do it. All right, cool. I think dinner, right? But it looks like our avatar is small. So let me just increase that a bit. Okay, cool. Then it's good. All right, nice stuff. So with just little number or just small lines of code, we have gone this far. Isn't that great? Right? This is just what Flutter allows you to do. Right? So let's move on. So the next thing we want to do is to display some a couple of text, right? A couple of text. Now, here, like I said, this is rushed work, so I'm not kind of following most of what you should be doing, right, as a convention, right? But in the source code I'm going to share with you, you will see a proper way of doing most of the stuff, right? Like the code is more arranged, it's more structured, and it's not rushed, right? So you find a better way of doing this stuff. But for now, we're just going to kind of ignore these guidelines and just do something really quick. So let's add a couple of text, right? For uh, the profile name, right? And also the profession, for example, or role, title. You just create a text with that. Right? I'll put John Doe here. Of course, you can use whatever you want to use, like your name there, right? Put John Doe. Now, when we save this, we see John Doe, right? But we want to style this. We want to make it bolder, bigger, add some kind of other styling there, right? You can use that. You can use the style property of the text with that. You just pass the text type there, text type, right? Then here we can define the font size. I want the name to be big. I want something like let's say 20 for the font size. Then for the font weight, it will be really good. I'll use weight 700. Yeah. Okay, not bad. Now let's increase this more. Make it high up, 30. Okay, and this looks good. All right. So we're getting there, right? We have the text display, right? Then the next thing we want to do is create the second text, right? So we can basically just copy this, right? Copy this one, paste that to create our text. So here our Flutter developer, font size, let's make it smaller, like 18. And the font weight, 400 is fine. And for this one, I want to change the color instead of using the default black. I will use primary color, right? So the indigo. Indigo. Now when I save this, I check, have this. It's a go, right? But the Flutter developer is still kind of big. I want the name to be bigger, right? Like it should really stand out. So let's increase that to something like F5. Okay. So we can reduce this. Right. Cool. Awesome. So we have this. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is to add a role of social media icon, right? Social media icon, like we saw from the original application or I previewed. So here for this one, we need to display them in a row, right? So what we're going to do is to create a row widget. I need to widget it takes a children, just like column. Column arranges its elements vertically, while row arranges its element horizontally. So it lays out elements horizontally. So here, we're also going to create some kind of icon buttons. Let's say icon button. Um, let's say icon. Icon dot Facebook founded. Okay, so it needs you to pass on some kind of an compressed property or parameter. So here, I'm just going to pass pass none, but that will make it unclickable. So I'll just pass an empty function definition there. Just make it clickable. So now when we run it, you see something? Awesome. We see a little Facebook icon down here, right? So now we want it to be having the primary color, right? So we can change the color, and we can also increase the size a bit to make it bigger. So we'll change this color to um, colors, indigo. Then we're going to change the size like that. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's cool. But not that big. Let's make it bigger. Awesome. But now we want it to be centered, right? Let's center the um, the icon, right? It shouldn't just be staying right there. But of course, if that's how you want your own to be, that's cool. You can do that. So here for the row is one of those layout element widgets that allows you to center um, your widget using a property of the widget. So instead of having to use the center widget, you can just use a property called the main axis alignment. That is how do you want to align this element on the main axis. For a row, the main axis is the horizontal axis, right? So like I said, we're going to be covering this in a future section, so don't worry about it. For now, just use it. So just say main axis alignment, center. So I can center it. So for now, we just have just one. So it will center that one icon. So we can basically just copy the others, right? So ideally, what I would do is to create a function that does this, right? But since we're in a rush, I'll just copy it and paste this. Here we can have another icon. We can put another icon here. Let's say for something like WhatsApp. Here we have an email. And here we have Reddit. Reddit. And there. Right? And the idea is also showing you how the icon looks like, which is pretty cool. Awesome. So now let's save that. And wow, we have this. This is great, right? With us, this line of code, these lines of code, we have something like this. This is massive. Now let's space things out, right? We can basically just copy this our padding widget here. And use it to kind of space our text from our icon. So this one that is big access, go say 20. That is enough space, right? That's cool. So then we can also attempt to space our icons if we want, right? We can attempt to space them if we want by kind of giving them, just put paddings within them and put whatever value you want, right? Instead of top, I can just use right here. So give me a space to the right. Let's say space of 10 pixels, 10 units, not to do with pixels. You can see there's a space here, right? So I can do the same thing for this other icon, just to give breathing space there. And also, we have this. Pretty cool, right? All right. Okay. So we've come this far with so little amount of code, right? So we didn't have to type much. We didn't have to create code for creating these buttons. We didn't have to write code for this avatar image, things like that. Okay.
So for this icon, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
For this icons you created,
Yeah,
sometimes like in a real app we'll be required to click it, right? And it will do something.
yeah.
So if you want to do that now, is there a property you implement to make it clickable, or you have to do it in a different way from this?
Okay, funny thing is
I
that
didn't know.
what we have here is actually clickable. Can you see? Can I click it?
Is that
So it's already clickable
okay? You
already.
can't.
Yeah, you can. You
Oh,
can click
wow.
it. Looks like it's not going to do anything. But if you want to do something, you can basically just put what you want it to do inside here. You put this unpressed property here. Just pass whatever code you
Okay,
want to
okay,
run.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
Right? But already it's clickable, so we'll have a clickable button there. Right? So you can
Yeah,
decide
yeah.
to add your own kind of feature, just extend it and do whatever you wanted to do when it's clicked, right? To do something. But yeah, it's clickable. Right? So we're almost done. Our time is
That's
almost out also. So let's just quickly add the fab, the floating action button to our scaffold, right? That is the last part. So just add the floating action button, right? You want to pass an unpressed also, right? But we know if it's clickable or not. Then we'll pass an right? Right? So here for child, we just use an icon. So I'll just use the call icon. Call icon, right? When you run it, awesome. You have a file here, which is also clickable, right? There. I'm having the little column icon there. But you notice in mine, the icon is a bit bigger than this, right? How do we make it bigger? We can wrap our floating action button inside some kind of uh, a sized box, right? To define the sized box. Let's kind of increase the, let's say, I think the height. So let's say the height is 30, for example. Now, when you save this, nah, okay, it changes, but let's make it bigger, right? Something like 80, for example. I think that is an excess, right? So now let me try to make it way bigger. 120, for example. Yeah, but it's not really reflecting, right? It's maintaining its original size. Why? That is because this size box now is it needs to be constrained somehow. You need to constrain the size of the floating action but they are changing before it can reflect. Right? This is something that is not pretty, it's not something beginner like, but don't worry, because showing us how to fix this issue, right? But you don't really have to understand it right now. Let me just quickly do that. So I can basically just wrap this with a fitted box. Sorry, wrap this. It's not the option. So the fitted box. You can see it's obeying now, right? It's using the value that we give it. Well, now this value is too big, so I will reduce that to something like 70, for example. Of course, you can use yours, whatever value you want for yours. But for mine, I think 70 looks good, or I'll try 80. That's that. Have this, right? So in a short amount of time, we've been able to come up with something like this with so little amount of code. How many lines of code do we will have? At most 74 lines of code, and look at what you have. Isn't this awesome, right? So this is just to show you the power of Flutter. Of course, this is just scratching the surface. We have not really done anything yet, right? Flutter can create way more powerful applications than this, but this is something, this is massive. And if you are able to write your own Flutter application like this, deploy it, preview it, and even send it to your friends, it's something to be proud of, right? So this is just the beginning, guys, and we're going to be doing more and more of this in our future sections, right? So yeah, this brings us to the end of our section today, and our time is up, but I can answer your questions before we close the section for today. So guys, do you have any question? Let me quickly look at the next section. Okay, are the emulators for VS Code? Okay, so the emulator is not really for Android Studio. The emulator is like a separate application on its own. So once you have the emulator installed in your computer, you can actually open it, right? Just the same way I open my simulator here. This simulator came with Xcode. That's with an ID, just like Android Studio. But I didn't have to open Xcode to use it. So the same way, you can also open an Android emulator window and write your code in VS Code, and you'll be able to use it the same way I'm doing this emulator here. So yeah, you can use emulator VS Code. Sorry? You have a question, Kalan? Okay. So I appreciate you send the code to the group to just run it on my system as I'm having issues with my phone.
I downloaded an emulator with Android
Okay.
Studio.
Okay.
An emulator with Android Studio.
Okay. Yeah. Whoa.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you are.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You are breaking though.
I downloaded an emulator with Android Studio, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So there's this device manager you can open.
Yes, and still it doesn't. It's downloaded, but it doesn't recognize it.
Wow. You're not breaking.
It's still breaking.
Yeah, you're breaking. Yeah, if you have any issues setting up your computer, you can just send a message to the group, right? And I'll reply as soon as I
Okay.
get.
Is
I'll
it clear?
send you any instructions. Yeah, you are breaking like very issue.
Yeah.
Just
All right.
yeah. But don't worry,
No
just
problem.
ask the group. So all right, so yeah, then for the second question, as for the source code, like I said, I think let me just quickly paste the link to the working example here. I'll also paste this in the group, right? So our time is way overdue, so we have to go. But yeah, that's the name. For this, it's not this one I just did now. Is the one I worked on before this. That one is more optimized, right, and is more organized than the one we just did here. So that one kind of teach you the conventional way of writing your application, right? But this one is just to get something up and running. All right. So do you have any more questions before we close the section? Okay. So I'll take that as no question.
Okay.
So
Wait.
okay,
Just to be clear.
okay.
Just to be clear. We can select any emulator. Like, there's no specific emulator that will give us any issues, but like, they are all good because there are multiple
Uh,
options.
yeah, but the difference now is in how should I put it? Like when you're creating an emulator, right? Yeah, but it's still the same thing. So each one has his own Android version, right? Like yeah, you can download an Android R emulator, Android P emulator, whatever Android version you want, right? So for now,
Yeah.
starting out, you don't have to worry about that, right? When you start doing something more advanced, right, you have to worry about how your application works on a specific version of Android, a specific version of iOS. You understand, right? So for now, you don't have to worry about that. What I'll recommend is just download the latest, right? Just start with the latest version, so you don't have any issue. Just install, download the latest version of the emulator, start it up, and just use that, right? But in the future, you see how to better choose and the method that you want to use. Like as you can see, I have a number of emulators here, right? And I use them for different purposes. You understand? So I can open two at a time just to test run the same application. You understand? Okay, but for now, you don't have to worry about that. Just create one emulator and just use that. All right. So yeah, I hope that is clear. That will be all for today's section. So thank you guys for attending the section. Like I said, it's a recorded section, so you'll be getting the video for you to be able to watch. The resources are also going to be shared with you. So see you next time on this section next Saturday. Goodbye.